Welcome back, friends. Tonight we journey into the heart of ancient Rome. The heat of the sand rises around your ankles, the scent of sweat and iron fills the air, and just beyond the high stone wall, thousands of voices roar with anticipation. You're not in the audience. You're the entertainment. Welcome to the Colosseum. You're a Roman gladiator now, and whatever dreams you had of fame and freedom, well, keep those small, real small. So, before you get too comfortable, hit like and subscribe. But only if I've earned it. No pressure, no hard feelings. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Always curious where and when you're listening from. Now, go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe curl up with a blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, the soles of your sandaled feet sticking slightly to the sun-baked earth. The light is blinding, the noise overwhelming. All around, the arena swells with sound. Cheers, jeers, the occasional laugh at your expense. A slave hands you a chipped helmet and a small unbalanced sword. Generous. You're lucky today. The truth is, being a Roman gladiator isn't the noble calling it's sometimes made out to be. It's not a dramatic slow-motion sprint with a sword raised high, while violins swell behind you. No, it's more like waking up sore every day, shoveling barley mush into your mouth, and hoping the guy across from you trips before you do. The sand under your feet isn't pristine, it's layered with blood, old and new. Historians still argue whether they ever actually cleaned it between shows, or just let the gore pile up as some sort of macabre seasoning. Either way, it smells as bad as it sounds. Let's back up a bit. You didn't start here, in the middle of the Colosseum. No, you were dragged, marched, or shoved into this life. Maybe you were a soldier once, captured in some backwater skirmish near the edges of the Empire. Maybe you stole a loaf of bread, and the magistrate decided to make an example out of you. Or maybe you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time and had the kind of build they thought would look good bleeding on camera. Not that they had cameras, but you get the idea. Even your name might be gone by now, replaced with something more dramatic. Something that looks good carved into a tablet or shouted by a drunk aristocrat with too much wine in his cup. Maximus the Merciless. Aquila the Flame. You don't feel like a flame. You feel like a guy who hasn't pooped properly in 3 days because the rations gave you cramps. And that armour? Oh, the armour. It's less battle-ready, and more a costume department reject. You might have a helmet that blocks most of your vision, a shield that weighs more than a toddler, and sandals that definitely weren't designed for traction on blood-slick sand. Realistically, it's not protecting much. But it does look cool from the stands, and in this business, optics are half the game. The other half? Surviving. There's no warm-up, no stretching unless you count the involuntary clenching of every muscle in your body. The gate opens, the sun is a punch in the face. You're pushed forward by a handler with a stick, like you're cattle heading into a butcher shop. You try to remember what you learned in training, but your body's buzzing with nerves and adrenaline, and the uncomfortable reality that, yes, this could be it. Your opponent is already out there, flexing for the crowd like he's auditioning for a toga commercial. You try to keep your breathing steady. He's got a trident, you've got a short sword and a stomach full of dread. They don't tell you that fights don't always end when someone drops. Sometimes they drag it out. Sometimes the loser has to play dead dramatically, then rise again for a second act. Or worse, lie there pretending while a costumed actor dressed as Pluto comes to collect your soul, which honestly just feels like salt in the wound. And don't forget the animals. Lions. Bears. Crocodiles. Yes, actual crocodiles. Fringe accounts even mention trained monkeys with daggers, though historians still argue whether that's fact or Roman satire taken too far. Either way, if it moved and looked scary, they probably tried to pit it against a man at some point. You wonder if this will be the day your name is etched on a wall in victory, or scribbled in a ledger under casualties. Either way, you're not in control, not really. The fight begins and everything is noise and movement and pain. Your sword arm aches, your shoulder feels like it might pop. You duck, parry. Pretend you know what you're doing. The crowd loves it when you stumble and recover. They cheer the flair, not the function. At some point you realise you're still alive. The other guy's on the ground, wheezing, A horn sounds. Officials glance at the Emperor's box. He raises his hand. You freeze. Is it thumbs up? Down? Sideways? What's the latest trend again? No time to think. The decision's made. A voice shouts something official sounding. Your opponent is dragged off or maybe left behind. You're too dizzy to care. You limp back through the tunnel. Your body is shaking, partly from exhaustion, partly from the weight of what just happened. A healer throws some vinegar on your wounds. You hiss. Congratulations, you've survived one day. And that's the kicker, really. You don't win, you survive. One more fight. One more breakfast of barley and flatbread. One more night sleeping next to a guy named Gaius who snores like a drowning ox. This isn't the life of a hero. This is a grindhouse of muscle and myth. And you're living it, whether you want to or not. You wake up to the sound of a wooden door creaking open. Bad news. Always. Maybe it's roll call. Maybe it's training. Maybe it's punishment for snoring. Either way, you don't get to say no. You never really did. See, most people think gladiators were these warrior celebrities who chose the arena for fame and riches. But let's be honest. Your entrance into this life was probably a lot less glamorous. You didn't audition, you were acquired. Maybe you were born free. Raised in some quiet Roman province, working your family's land or peddling pottery. Until one day, some soldiers showed up, accused your town of withholding taxes or siding with rebels, and next thing you know, you're chained up in the back of a wagon, branded as a traitor. That little mole on your arm? Say goodbye to it. Now it's just under the mark of damnatio ad ludum, a sentence to the games. Or perhaps you were a prisoner of war. Rome liked its conquests, and they had no shortage of defeated soldiers to repurpose as entertainment. You might have once fought proudly for your own king or chief, only to wake up one morning shackled to a dozen strangers, with a Latin-speaking overseer shouting at you to move faster. Worst-case scenario, you were born into it, the child of a slave, your fate sealed before your first word. Your name doesn't matter, your property, and if you're strong, broad-shouldered and young, well, congratulations. The Lanista, your new trainer, has a slot open in his ludus. That's a gladiator school, by the way. Think of it as boot camp meets prison with less privacy and more yelling. Historians still argue whether any free men voluntarily became gladiators. Some did, technically. Octorati they were called. Signed contracts, took oaths, even got a bonus payment up front. But let's not get carried away. These were mostly desperate men, deep in debt, on the run, or so down on their luck that fighting to the death looked like a reasonable career move. There was paperwork involved. You'd swear an oath to endure branding, chains, beatings, and death by fire, sword, or whatever else they thought up that day. Bit dramatic, sure, but accurate. You weren't just promising to fight, you were surrendering your body. Completely. And if you thought that paperwork came with benefits, not quite. The state didn't exactly have an HR department for gladiators. You got basic meals, a mat on the floor, and maybe a healer with more alcohol than expertise. That was the whole package. Let's pause here and meet your new boss, the Lanista. He owns you, literally. He bought you, trained you, and if you break a bone or catch a fever, he'll dock your worth accordingly. He's not in it for glory. He's in it for profits. You're an investment, like a racehorse with better abs. Your Lanista decides your schedule, your weapon class, and whether you get to live after your next match. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't refuse commands. You especially don't talk back, not unless you enjoy being introduced to the training whip. Now let's talk transportation. If you were sold in a slave market, it probably happened in a noisy plaza filled with merchants, livestock, and about 20 different smells competing for dominance. You were stripped, prodded, maybe even forced to show your teeth. Buyers haggled over your biceps like you were a basket of figs. 1 minute you're a person, the next, you're Item 27B. Strong male, intact teeth, minor scarring, ideal for combat. Quirky historical tidbit? In some auctions, gladiators were paraded in loincloths with little signs around their necks listing features, like a brutal Craigslist ad. Knows how to use a spear, slight limp, responds to threats, and once bought, your trip to the ludus might be over land or sea. If you're lucky, you're marched with a group, less chance of dying from exhaustion or bandits. If not, well, hope you enjoy solitary confinement and the occasional rat for company. Arriving at the training grounds, you're shown your new home. Stone walls, barred windows, and a smell that somehow combines mildew, sweat, and old olives. It's crowded. Privacy doesn't exist. You sleep, eat, and train beside the same dozen men every day. If you don't bond, you break. You're handed a tunic, possibly shoes if it's a generous day, and you're told the rules. There are many. Rule 1, survive training. Rule 2, obey instantly. Rule 3, nobody cares how you feel about any of this. And yet, in this bleak world, alliances form. You meet a Gaul who teaches you to brace your legs before impact. A Greek who shows you how to fake a fall just long enough to land a surprise strike. You share a laugh with a Thracian over how bad the food is, mostly boiled grains with the occasional surprise beetle for crunch. The paradox? For all its cruelty, the Ludus is the safest place you've been since losing your freedom. Here you're trained to survive, you're valuable. You're not being thrown into the arena yet. That will come, but for now, you're just waiting and hoping. Maybe you'll make a name for yourself. Maybe you'll win enough fights to earn your wooden sword, the rudies, a symbol of freedom for those who endure. Maybe your luck will hold just long enough to see another day. But deep down, you know better. This life wasn't chosen. It was assigned. And it rarely ends with applause. The rooster crows, though you're not sure it's a rooster so much as some guy named Felix who thinks he's hilarious. Either way, it's morning, and in the Ludus, that means one thing. Training. Grueling. Relentless. Soul-draining training. You sit up, already sore from the stone floor and last night's bruises. Your tunic sticks to your skin, damp from the mix of sweat and dreams you're too tired to remember. There's a ladle of lukewarm barley gruel waiting for you. Flavourless. But hey, it won't kill you. Probably. Outside, the training yard awaits. A dusty rectangle enclosed by high walls and watched constantly by the doctors, your instructors. They're mostly retired gladiators themselves, with permanent limps, scars like topographical maps, and the kind of humour that makes your bad knee feel like the least of your problems. You're handed a wooden sword. It's heavier than a real one, on purpose. The idea is that by the time you get into the arena with the real thing, it'll feel light as a feather. Charming, isn't it? Train with the sword equivalent of a tree branch, fight with steel, and maybe, just maybe, you'll live long enough to do it again tomorrow. Every day is a repetition of agony, sparring drills, footwork patterns, weapon forms until your arms give out and your legs shake. It's like being trapped in the worst CrossFit class of your life, except there's no smoothie bar afterward, and your coach hits you if you mess up, and don't even think about slacking. One of the doctors, a wiry ex-mamillo named Sura, has a long stick and an impeccable sense for when you're zoning out. You drift into daydreams for half a second. Whack! He taps you on the shin hard enough to wake your ancestors. You work in pairs, usually with someone as miserable as you are. You practice disarms, shields raised, shields lowered, striking at the shoulder, the knee, the ribs. Your partner grunts when you hit too hard. You grunt when he hits harder. The point isn't finesse, it's survival. And then there's the palace, a sturdy wooden post jammed into the ground. You'll spend hours hacking at it, imagining it's your opponent, or your trainer, or that official who laughed when you tripped during your first bout. Everyone hits the palace with a different face in mind. Diet plays a weird role here. You'd think gladiators were all meat and mead, right? Wrong. Your meals are mostly grains, legumes, and the occasional piece of cheese or dried fig if it's a special day. Meat, rare. Wine, watered down. This was no accident. The high-carb, high-calorie diet was intentional. A pudgy gladiator had more body mass to absorb cuts without immediate death. It's a defensive strategy. You're less likely to die from a superficial wound if you've got an extra inch of belly between you and the blade. Some scholars have cheekily referred to you as barley men, due to your heavy intake of it. And the supplements? Oh, just some ashen-charred bones crushed into powder and mixed into drinks. Yep, calcium and magnesium. Welcome to Roman nutrition, where your protein shake might include cremated leftovers. Quirky tidbit of the day? Archaeologists examining gladiator graveyards in Ephesus found unusually high bone density. So those ash smoothies? Apparently not just for show. Between drills, you clean weapons, repair armour, or, if it's your lucky hour, haul water buckets from the well like a very ripped courier service. It's a never-ending cycle. Labour, sweat, and the occasional verbal abuse in Latin. You sleep when you can, usually in a cramped dormitory shared with a dozen other snoring, groaning fighters. One guy sings in his sleep, another punches walls. You find a spot on the floor that's slightly less cold than the rest and call it bed. But maybe the hardest part of all this isn't the physical pain, it's the mental grind, the waiting. You're training to die well. What a mission statement. The promise of glory, of riches, of admiration. It's dangled like a carrot. But in your heart, you know the odds. Most gladiators don't become legends. They become stains in the sand. Historians still argue whether these brutal training regimens were truly meant to prepare you, or just weed out the weak before they ever embarrassed the school in front of a paying crowd. If you broke here in training, nobody had to refund a ticket. And yet, you improve. Your swing sharpens. Your stance tightens. You begin to anticipate your opponent's footwork. You last longer in sparring matches. The doctors nod once in a while, which is their version of applause. One even grunts a compliment. Didn't look completely incompetent today. You treasure it like gold. Once in a while, there's a mock battle, a showcase. The Lannister invites some wealthy friends to watch. You're paraded in front of them, stripped to the waist, oiled up like a roast chicken, and told to fight, just hard enough to impress, but not enough to injure. Because broken fighters don't sell tickets. They laugh. They sip wine. One of them points at you and whispers, "You pretend not to hear. You pretend your future isn't entirely dependent on whether or not that senator thinks you look interesting." At night you stare at the stars through a barred window and think about your old life, your family, a quiet path by a stream, a piece of bread that wasn't handed to you with a side of ridicule. But when morning comes, you rise, you eat, you train, you endure, because that's all you can do. You might think that once you're in shape, trained and not actively bleeding from the eyeballs, you finally get to choose your weapon. Something heroic, like a gleaming longsword or a massive axe with spikes, maybe even dual blades if you're feeling particularly video gamey. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. You don't pick your weapon. Your weapon picks you, or more accurately, your Lannister does, and he doesn't care what you think looks cool. You're assessed like meat at a butcher's stall, and assigned a gladiator class that suits your size, build, and supposed personality. It's branding, baby. You're not just a fighter, you're a product, a character in the Empire's longest-running blood-soaked soap opera. Let's say you're tall and broad-shouldered. Congrats, you're probably a Mamillo. Your gear? A short sword called a gladius, a heavy rectangular shield, and a helmet so large it looks like a cross between a bucket and a mailbox, complete with a decorative fish on top. For reasons. Or maybe you're quick, wiry and fast on your feet. You're a retiarius, wielding a net and a trident. Yes, like a Roman fisherman, except the fish bite back. You wear no helmet, hardly any armour, and rely on speed and trickery. You'll be paired with a heavily armoured opponent to make things fair, meaning wildly unfair for you. Then there's the Thraex, with a curved blade and a tiny shield that feels like someone just handed you a dinner plate and said, "Good luck." Or the Secutor, whose helmet is smooth and featureless to avoid getting tangled in the net of a retiarius. The eye holes are so small your peripheral vision is basically none. These aren't just weapons, they're roles, archetypes. A Mumio versus a retiarius. That's not just a fight, it's a story. Slow, steady power versus fast, scrappy trickery. The crowd loves it. You're just trying not to get stabbed in the lung. What's that? You have an opinion? You want a different weapon? That's cute. The arena isn't a build-your-own gladiator workshop. The audience wants consistency. They paid good denarii to see a classic matchup, not some wild card swinging an axe in flip-flops. And the gear isn't standardised either. Helmets vary wildly. Some have ornate crests. Others are just dented bronze bowls with eye slits. Armour could be leather, metal, or a mix. Shields might be rectangular, circular, or chipped beyond repair. There's no OSHA, inspector, checking for safety violations. If it fits and doesn't fall off, you're good to go. Fun historical tidbit. Some gladiators had armour so distinctive fans would recognise them instantly. Imagine being so famous that your oddly shaped shoulder guard gets you spotted at the Roman equivalent of Whole Foods. But don't get too attached to your gear. You don't own it. It's communal, like a very deadly costume closet. You clean it, carry it, and sometimes fight in someone else's sweat-soaked leftovers. If you die, someone else gets your stuff. If you win, you still give it back. And then there's the issue of how you fight. You're trained to match the style of your class, but also expected to adapt for drama. A duel that ends in 2 seconds isn't good for business. The crowd wants tension, reversals, a little flair. You can't just win. You have to win entertainingly or lose entertainingly. And that means some moves are forbidden. Too quick, too clean. You're told to dance, even when your ribs are on fire. Imagine getting a sword slashed to the shoulder and being expected to milk it like it's dinner theatre. You stagger dramatically, maybe spit out a little fake blood. Okay, real blood, but still, it's for effect. Your doctors drill into your head that this is spectacle. If you're going to fall, fall big. If you're going to land a hit, make it sing. You're not just a warrior. You're a performer in a stadium where the script is mostly improvised and the consequences are permanent. Historians still argue whether gladiator fights were choreographed. Some claim bouts were planned, outcomes pre-decided, especially in big festivals with high-profile fighters. Others say most matches were genuine, raw combat with only vague suggestions on how to play it. Either way, you fight like your life depends on it, because it does. Oh, and weapons can be sabotaged, not always. But sometimes a blade is dulled just enough to extend the show, or a helmet is loosened to increase the drama of a flying removal mid-fight. It's the Roman version of rigging reality TV, and every time you step into the ring, the gear reminds you of who you are, or who they want you to be. The Retiarius knows he's the underdog. The Murmillo feels the weight of his armour, and the expectations it carries. The crowd doesn't see individuals, they see types, characters. You're a walking myth in borrowed clothes. Sometimes the audience even bets on the style of your death. Will it be quick, drawn out, poetic? Will you fall nobly, clutching your sword? Or will you grovel, crawling across the sand, hands up in a silent plea to the Emperor? Either way, the helmet stays on. Gotta keep up the mystique. And here's the final irony. After all the training, all the sweat, all the rules, you could still get paired against someone wildly outside your class. A Venator who fights beasts. A Democharis with 2 blades and twice the rage. Or worse, a criminal sentenced to die horribly, who has nothing to lose and every reason to go berserk. You enter the ring with your trident or your gladius and you hope. Hope your opponent plays fair. Hope your armour holds. Hope your assigned role today ends in applause, not silence. Because you're not just a man, you're a Murmillo, or a Retiarius, or a name someone else chose for you. And that's what you'll be until the day you drop the sword for good. You step into the sunlight, chest bare, shield in hand, helmet gleaming, or at least not actively rusty. The crowd sees you. You hear it. The roar that rolls over the Colosseum like thunder on stone. They're not just here for blood. They're here for you, or at least the version of you they think they know. You're not just a gladiator today, you're a celebrity, briefly. The crowd loves a good story. And you, my friend, are the latest chapter in a long-running epic. They chant your name, well, your stage name, something suitably macho, probably ending in us. You raise your weapon, not because you feel particularly triumphant, but because that's what they want. And here, want equals power. Their power. This strange relationship with the audience is the heart of your life now. They're your ticket to survival, or your very vocal execution committee. See, while the emperor or editor runs the games, the crowd is the one with the influence. They're the social media mob of the ancient world. If they cheer for you, your chances of getting spared skyrocket. If they boo, hope you didn't make dinner plans. Their reactions can sway even the highest authority. Thumbs up, thumbs down. It's not always clear which means what. Historians still argue whether the thumb gestures were literal or just symbolic. Some say a thumb down meant drop your weapon, not kill him. Others claim it was the opposite. What's certain is this: the louder they yell, the more pressure there is to obey their bloodlust. And boy, are they fickle. One day, they love you. You're the underdog who triumphed. The next, they want a twist. Maybe they're tired of your act. Maybe you reminded them too much of their tax collector. Maybe they just spilled their wine and need to vent. Your fame, if you can call it that, is a double-edged sword. You might get fan mail. Sure. A rich lady tosses you a wreath. A poet scribbles your name into a suggestive verse. Maybe a child wears a wooden helmet and calls himself Little Maximus. Adorable. But the same crowd that screams your name today might call for your head tomorrow, just to see what colour your blood is. Entertainment, remember. In between fights, you're paraded around the city during festivals. You're fed slightly better food. You might even be invited to a banquet, though not to eat. You're there to be stared at like a lion in a robe. Senators nudge each other. That's him, the one who beat the Nubian with the scythe. They might ask you to flex. They might ask you to recite a line from a play you've never seen. You smile, nod, and try not to spill anything on their marble floors. Back at the Ludus, your status shifts. If you're popular, the Lannister favours you. Fewer beatings, better gear. You might be paired with a weaker opponent to make sure your brand lives another day. You're a draw now, and they don't want to kill the Golden Goose too early. You might even get a nickname. The Red Ghost. The Eastern Lion. Something catchy. It gets scratched into amphory and scrawled on tavern walls. People bet on you, bake bread in your shape, or offer you tokens, small charms carved from ivory or bone, with your likeness and name etched in miniature. Like collectible action figures, but deadlier. And then there are the endorsements. Not formally, of course. This isn't the NBA. But let's say a wealthy merchant likes your style. He might sponsor you, throw a few extra coins your way, maybe let you wear a sash bearing his family crest into battle. It's less about advertising and more about bragging rights. That's my Gladiator. You even get gifts, jewellery, fine cloaks, letters, some from admirers, some from people hoping you'll show up at their villa. And yes, some of those admirers are extremely married Roman elites who enjoyed dangerous flings with dangerous men. Quirky fact, there's graffiti in Pompeii that reads "Celadus the Thracian makes the girls sigh." Just imagine that scrawled next to a mosaic of vegetables. Gladiators had fans, real ones, swooning ones, jealous husbands included, but don't let it go to your head. Because this fame is paper thin. You're not nobility. You're still a slave, a tool, an expendable star whose value vanishes the moment you lose a fight, or worse, become boring. If the crowd thinks you're slowing down, you're not legendary. You're last season. There's always another new fighter rising, younger, faster, maybe with a cool scar and a tragic backstory. The crowd loves tragic backstories, and when the audience turns against you, it's swift. You trip, you hesitate, you bleed a little too much. The cheers fade, a few whistles, then a chant for your opponent. Suddenly, you're not the hero, they are. You're old news, you've been unfollowed. It doesn't matter how many matches you've won, you're only as good as your last fight, literally. And if that fight ends poorly, you might not get another. You fight, not for honour, but for attention. You survive, not by skill alone, but by staying interesting, loud, memorable. It's not a battle, it's a performance review, and every time you step into the arena you wonder, will they cheer? Will they remember? Will they care? Because fame in ancient Rome, it burns fast, and it burns through you. You wake before dawn, not because you're excited, but because someone just kicked your foot and said, "It's your day." And in the Ludus, that phrase isn't followed by cake or a surprise party. It means you're on the roster. Today, you fight. They march you out early before the sun turns the city into a clay oven. You and a dozen others, chained together, make your way through the quiet streets of Rome, past groggy vendors and half-swept taverns. The city barely notices you, but soon enough, the Colosseum will be full, and every eye will be on your every move. It towers over you, stone and shadow and spectacle, built to hold tens of thousands. It's not just an arena, it's the arena, the Flavian amphitheatre, the big leagues. Inside, you're separated and herded into holding cells beneath the stadium. It's dark, damp. You can hear the muffled crowd above. You smell iron, sweat, and something you hope is just spoiled wine. You're given a final oil rub to make your muscles glisten for the crowd, and your armour is checked, not for safety, but for shine. The day starts without you. First there's the Venetianese, the animal hunts. You hear the distant roars, both beast and human. Lions, leopards, maybe an elephant if they're feeling flashy. You don't see it, but you feel it. The ground vibrates when something large and angry charges the sands above. You sit. You wait. Your stomach knots itself tighter with every cheer. Then come the executions. Criminals, enemies of the state, people who annoyed the wrong senator. They're marched out in costume, sometimes as mythical figures, sometimes as themselves. One is dressed as Icarus. He's given wings and pushed from a high platform. The crowd laughs. Quirky detail? Roman executions were often reenactments of myths. You could die as Orpheus, mauled by beasts, or Actaeon torn apart by dogs. It's theatre. Horrible, blood-soaked theatre. Finally, it's your turn. The sun is now high. The heat presses down like a hand. You're led through the gates, out into the light, and the noise slams into you, so loud your heartbeat stutters. You step into the arena. The sand is hot, even through your sandals. The walls rise around you, packed with people. Senators in togas, merchants fanning themselves, kids pointing, everyone watching. You scan the arena. Your opponent waits on the other end. You size him up. He's bigger, older. The crowd chants something. It might be your name, or his. You can't tell. A trumpet blares. The editor of the games, a city official, maybe even the emperor himself, lifts a hand. The signal. It begins. The first moments are always tense. You circle, faint, test his guard. The sun glints off your blades. Your armour creaks. The crowd murmurs, hungry for action. He lunges. You block. You strike. He ducks. You dance back. It's clumsy, violent ballet. And all the while, your thoughts are a blur. Not of glory or death, of muscle memory, of survival. You land a hit. The crowd erupts. He stumbles. You don't follow up. Yet. Draw it out. Make it count. You remember your training. Don't kill too quickly. Let them feel the fight. The sand is streaked now. Blood, sweat and dirt. Your arm burns. Your chest heaves. He tries a wild swing. You sidestep. Trip him. He goes down. And now it's time. You stand over him, blade ready. He raises a hand, pleading. The crowd roars. Half want mercy, half want blood. You glance up. The editor decides. He signals, perhaps with a thumb, perhaps a wave. Historians still argue about the exact gestures, but you know what it means. Spare him. You lower your sword. The crowd groans, some cheer. You step back as attendants rush in, drag him out. You're ushered toward the tunnel, still alive. Back under the arena they give you water. You drink. You collapse. Every muscle screams. Your vision blurs, but your heart still beats. You survived. Later you're brought back out for the victor's lap. The crowd chants again. You don't hear them. You're too focused on not passing out. The girl throws a flower. A man waves a cloth with your name on it. You try to smile. It comes out more like a grimace. Back in the holding cells, you're patched up with wine-soaked cloth and herbal paste. A healer mutters about your shoulder, says it'll bruise but not break. Small blessings. Your fellow gladiators slap your back, offer nods. One cracks a joke you're too tired to understand. You chuckle anyway. Outside, the games continue. More fights, more roars, more blood. You're done for the day, but not for good. Tomorrow it starts again. Because in the Colosseum, you're not a man. You're a moment, and moments don't last forever. You're limping today. Not dramatically. Just enough that every step whispers, you are not okay. But in the ludus, that doesn't earn you rest. Just a snide look from a doctor, and maybe a fresh set of drills to loosen you up. You know the real reason. They need to make sure you can still bleed on cue. That's the job. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Your suffering is the point. The Roman crowd didn't just come for victory. They came for pain. Yours. They want to see you hurt, to see your face twist in agony, your body falter, your blood mark the sand like spilled wine. And you? You've got to make it look good. You're not just fighting, you're performing pain. Remember that dislocated shoulder you thought was healed? Not quite, but tape it up, keep it moving, and if it pops mid-match, milk it. Make the crowd gasp. If you're lucky, they'll be impressed. If not, they'll ask for a refund. Not literally, but with their volume. The doctors teach you how to fall, how to scream without sounding ridiculous, how to writhe in a way that makes an aristocrat lean forward in his seat. You learn to time your gasps between strikes. You learn how to fake a near collapse, and then suddenly recover to land the winning blow. If wrestling has kayfabe, you have mortis theatrica, the art of dying dramatically, and die you will. If not today, eventually. Most gladiators don't retire. They end with a final scene, so you prepare for it, mentally. You've seen the good deaths. Slow, tragic, noble. The crowd loves that. They remember that. The bad deaths, they're quick, sloppy, forgettable. A guy trips, gets speared, twitches, done. The crowd barely flinches. It's like someone changed the channel. Some matches aren't even fair. They're designed not to be. You might be paired against someone you've never trained with. Bigger, faster, or worse, someone you know, a friend. You've eaten next to him, sparred with him, complained about the food with him. Now, you have to make it look like you want to kill him, because if you don't, the crowd will think it's boring. And if the crowd's bored, someone doesn't get to go home. Historians still argue whether gladiators ever threw matches for the sake of the crowd, whether the trainers told them who should win, or if it was all pure improvisation. But you know the truth. You've seen the nudges, the looks, the brief whispers before the gates open. It's not rigged, exactly, but it is managed. The crowd doesn't want real chaos. They want curated violence. They want just enough uncertainty to be excited, but not so much that the narrative slips. If you've been winning for months, they want to see you challenged. If you're new, they want to see you prove yourself or die trying. It's pain, yes, but pain with plot. Let's talk injuries. You've had them. Broken ribs, split knuckles. Once, a sword caught your thigh and left a gash so wide it took a week to scab. No stitches, just cloth, vinegar, and a prayer. You walk differently now. You hide the limp. Quirky fact. Some gladiators wore padded underarmour beneath their gear. Not for protection, but to keep the blood off the armour. It made cleaning easier. Priorities. And when you lose, if you're lucky you survive, you're dragged off, patched up, maybe given a cup of wine and a slap on the back. Nice dying out there, someone says. Loved the twist at the end. But if you're not lucky, you get the nod. The crowd votes, and the editor gives the signal. Your opponent steps forward, blade ready, and you kneel. There's a ritual to it. You lower your weapon, you tilt your head, you expose the neck. The idea is to make it clean, quick, beautiful even, and if you're very unlucky, you don't get that. You get the coup de grace from an amateur, a moment of fumbling as someone panics and misses. You scream. The crowd goes quiet. The moment is ruined. You die, not as a hero, but as a botched finale. You've seen it happen. You never forget those screams. Sometimes they spice it up, add props, fire, chariots. There's even been matches on floating platforms over shallow pools. The crowd loves novelty. They once dressed two fighters as mythological heroes, gave them scripted lines before the fight, and made them recite while swinging swords. The poetry was bad, but the crowd lost their minds. The winner posed over the loser's body and shouted something about vengeance. The audience threw roses. The loser threw up. You wonder sometimes if you're really a person anymore, or just a walking trauma vignette. Pain becomes normal. You wake up sore, go to bed sore. Your body is one long complaint, but pain is also your paycheck, your way to stay relevant. You train to endure it, to sell it, to turn it into theatre, and when you can't anymore, you vanish. Replaced by the next bruised face with a catchy nickname. But for now, you're still standing, still walking, still hurting, and the crowd still watches. They always will, until the moment they don't. You're lying on your mat, arms behind your head, staring at the ceiling of the Ludus dorm. It's cracked and flaking, kind of like your patience. Another fight's behind you. You're sore, but alive. The room smells like oil, sweat, and someone's badly hidden fig stash. And for once, you're not just thinking about the next fight, you're thinking about money. Because surprise, being a gladiator isn't always just about bleeding for public applause. Sometimes it is about business. Strange, right? But even within this brutal world, there are perks, if you know how to play the game. Now, to be clear, you're not paid a salary. You're property. But you can earn bonuses. A good fight might net you a pouch of coins tossed from a pleased patron in the stands. Win several matches. The editor might give you a gift. Coins, wine, maybe even a new tunic that doesn't smell like disappointment. Some gladiators, especially the popular ones, start building a fan base. And that fan base wants souvenirs. Autographs weren't a thing, but little clay tokens called tesserae. Those were huge. They had your name, your likeness, maybe even a stylized pose. They were like ancient merch. Some fans collected them. Others placed them on household shrines because, well, why not pray to the guy who survived a lion? You could also score some private engagements. Let's just say, Roman elites had a thing for the dangerous type. Gladiators were exotic, exciting, taboo. It was a power play for nobles to sleep with you, brag about it, then pretend it didn't happen in front of the Senate. Some gladiators leaned into it. Got gifts, gold, fine wine, and better bread. Others tried to stay quiet about it. Either way, you learn to navigate the whispers. Just don't get caught with the wrong senator's wife, or the senator. That's the kind of mistake that doesn't get healed with vinegar and gauze. Quirky tidbit time? Emperor Commodus, yes, the actual emperor, was obsessed with gladiators. Fought in the arena himself, though it was always rigged, of course. He'd sometimes charge Rome for the privilege of watching him compete. Pure theatre. He even styled himself as Hercules Club and all. Talk about a side hustle on an imperial scale. But back to you. If you win enough, and you survive long enough, you might start thinking about the impossible, buying your freedom. It's rare, but it happens. A gladiator who earns enough favour, money, and crowd love can be awarded the rudies, a wooden sword signifying release from combat duty. That little stick, it's everything. Once you have it, you're technically free. Some stay on to train new fighters, others vanish, probably into a quieter life involving olives and never hearing a crowd again. But freedom doesn't mean forgetting. You still walk like a fighter. You still dream in sand and blood. And if you ever come back to the arena, it's usually not to fight. It's to be paraded like a relic. Let's not forget the scandals. Oh, the scandals! There was a case where two rival gladiators supposedly faked a feud to drive up their match's stakes, like ancient hype men. The fight sold out. Half the city showed up. Turns out they'd already agreed to go soft on each other. The crowd didn't mind, it was entertaining. The lanista, furious. Another time, a gladiator faked an injury to skip a match, then was spotted at a senator's villa, half-dressed and feeding grapes to someone else's spouse. That didn't end well. He was back in the arena the next day, this time with a shorter sword and a much angrier opponent. Historians still argue whether these stories are exaggerations or reflections of the strange celebrity gladiators could achieve. But one thing's clear, if you made it big, you got attention. Not always the good kind. And let's talk about the lanista's cut. Oh yes, your side gigs. They get a portion. Everything you earn, they track. Like the worst agent/landlord combo in history. You don't own yourself, remember? Even your perks are regulated. Still, you hustle. Because hustle is survival. You train harder. Play the crowd. Make eye contact with the rich lady in the third row. Maybe she throws you a coin. Maybe she sends a messenger later. You accept. Or you don't. But you consider. Because this isn't just a fight game. It's a status game. You trade favours. Pass messages for guards. Fix another fighter's armour in exchange for gossip. One guy sells ointments on the side. Half of them are just olive oil mixed with ash. But hey, they shine the skin. And shining skin draws eyes. Some guys even rig bets. Quietly tell a fan they'll lose the match, throw it, and split the winnings. It's dangerous. If you're caught, the punishment is worse than death. It's disgrace. But if it works, you walk away richer. Or at least with enough to afford better sandals. Because in this life, every edge matters. So while the crowd sees muscle and violence, you know the truth. You're running a business. A dangerous, sand-covered, bruise-filled business with zero stability and infinite risk. But sometimes, in those fleeting moments between pain and applause, you make it work. You earn a coin, a favour, a whisper. You make it one day closer to the Rudies, one day closer to freedom. There's a rumour in the ludus, a whisper passed between bruised lips and swollen eyes. Someone made it. A retired gladiator, alive, free, owning land somewhere south of Naples, living off figs and wine, and never needing to sharpen a sword again. You want to believe it, desperately, because in this world, retirement isn't a stage, it's a miracle. See, most jobs have an exit strategy. Gladiators? Not so much. Your contract doesn't have a sunset clause. There's no pension, no golden sandals for 20 years of service. Your best hope, really, is to survive long enough to earn your way out. And that starts with the Rudies. It's a simple thing. A wooden sword, polished smooth, often handed over in a short ceremony in front of a crowd. It means freedom. It means you've fought enough, survived enough, and the editor or emperor has decided to let you go. But here's the catch. The Rudies is rare. Most gladiators die within their first few years. If you last longer, you become valuable, popular, and valuable slaves aren't often set free. Some who are awarded the Rudies choose to keep fighting anyway. Madness, right? But fame is addictive. So is the coin. And some simply don't know how to do anything else. What are you going to do? Become a farmer? A baker? No one wants a gladiator kneading dough with calloused fists. You've heard stories of fighters called back just once more for a special match. A festival. A tribute. Fight this one last time, then really retire. It's the Roman version of just one more gig. Some make it, others don't. And then there's the honorary Rudies. Sometimes a crowd favourite gets one as a gesture, keeps fighting anyway. It's a PR move, not a retirement plan. Even if you survive and leave the arena, society doesn't always know what to do with you. You're a freedman now, but you were once a slave, and worse, an infamous, a person marked by public disgrace. You carry that stain everywhere. Some provinces allow you to marry, to open a business, to own land. Others don't. Some people see you and cheer. Others cross the street. To some, you're a hero. To others, a reminder of how close civilization is to chaos. Historians still argue whether freed gladiators could ever fully reintegrate. Records show a few did well, became trainers, opened ludus schools, or served as bodyguards for the rich. A few were even buried with honours, their tombstones boasting about their victories like LinkedIn profiles carved in stone. But for most it's a quiet fade. You disappear into the provinces, maybe you teach young nobles how to fight, maybe you drink too much, maybe you dream every night of sand and steel and screaming. Quirky tidbit. In some tomb inscriptions, retired gladiators were depicted in full armour. Helmet, shield, the works. Even in death they wore the costume. Either out of pride or because they never really took it off. Let's not ignore the darker fates. Some don't wait for the Rudies. They run, escape, flee in the night, hoping the guards are drunk and the gods are kind. Few succeed. Those who do live under false names, in fear, always listening for the sound of Roman boots. Others die in the ludus, not in the arena, but during training, or from illness, or from a quiet, uncelebrated injury that never healed. No fanfare, no final match. Just a wrapped body and a hole in the dirt behind the training yard. And then there are those forced back in. You thought you retired. You had the ceremony. You got the sword. You hung it above your bed. But the economy turns. A magistrate gets bored. The games need a legend to draw a crowd. They knock on your door. We just need you for one more bout. Just one. You say no. They offer coin. You say no again. They threaten your family. You say yes. And so, grey-haired and slower, you step once more into the arena. The crowd roars. They remember you. They love you. They want to see you fall dramatically. You give them a show. Sometimes they carry you out. Sometimes you walk, but never quite the same. In your bunk you run the numbers. How many matches, how many wins, how many scars. You remember the first fight, the first cheer, the first time someone threw a flower at your feet. And you remember all the names, the ones who didn't make it. Their faces flash through your mind at night, when everything is quiet except your own breath. You wonder if you'll be remembered, if someone someday will speak your name, or write it on a wall, or carve it into a token. You hope so, but for now you sleep, one eye open, always ready. Because until you're gone, or given that stick, you're not retired. You're just between matches. You're older now, not ancient but in gladiator years. You're a fossil. The young fighters look at you like you're part myth, part warning. They whisper your name with reverence, or is it pity? Hard to tell when your knees creak and your joints predict the weather better than any priest. You don't fight as often, but when you do, it's treated like an event. The veteran returns. The crowd loves a legend. They rise to their feet when you step into the arena, even if they're secretly hoping you collapse dramatically mid-battle. That's just good theatre. But legacy, that's the real fight now. You wonder what they'll remember. Will it be your record? 37 victories, 2 draws, 1 miracle comeback when your shield shattered and you still stood tall? Or will it be the time you slipped and the crowd laughed and your opponent waved at the audience like a stage comedian? The line between ridicule and reverence is thin, especially when your story belongs to the public. Rome remembers its gladiators, sure, in graffiti, in plays, in crude songs sung by drunks in taverns who couldn't swing a sword if their lives depended on it. Your name might live on in a scratched wall somewhere, next to a badly drawn stick figure holding a trident. Immortality, kind of. You've seen mosaics of gladiators, carefully laid tiles forming images of fights that happened decades ago, maybe more. One of those could be you, or not. They all look the same in armour. Helmets hide the eyes. Everyone's muscles are exaggerated. There's always blood, always action, always victory. But that's not how it was, is it? You remember the silence before the first strike, the clatter of metal on metal, the wheezing breath of the man across from you, whose name you never learned, even after your blade ended his story. You remember the way the sand stuck to your cuts, the way your fingers trembled when they handed you your rudies. That's the real legacy, the small moments, the ones nobody paints. Historians still argue whether gladiators were celebrated or despised, whether they were true heroes or just disposable entertainment. You know the answer isn't clean. You were both. Admired and forgotten, exalted and disposable, worshipped and ignored. Rome loved its games, but it didn't love you. Not really. Your name might live on in a list or maybe on someone's ring. Gladiator rings were a thing, by the way. Tiny portraits of fighters worn like lucky charms. Strange, isn't it? Someone might wear your likeness while they bet on your successor's death. Still, some of your brothers, yes, even rivals became brothers, found ways to preserve more than just wounds. Some wrote, dictated stories to literate slaves who transcribed them into scrolls. Others built small shrines, not to gods but to the fallen, pebbles for each name, a quiet rebellion against forgetting. You did your part. Taught a few things to the next generation, how to pivot on sand, how to take a hit and make it look like you meant to, how to spit blood without choking. They listen, they smile, they think they know. They don't, and maybe that's okay. One day the games will end. Not just yours, all of them. Someday the empire will falter, the amphitheatres will crumble, vines will grow over the stones where you bled. People will walk through ruins and wonder what kind of madness this place once held. They'll find carvings, helmets, bones. They'll piece it together, and maybe, just maybe, they'll understand what it meant to stand in the sand and face death while thousands cheered. Maybe they'll respect it. Maybe they won't. But you were there. You existed. And that's something. Now, as the last echoes of the arena fade and the roar of the crowd dissolves into silence, you find yourself walking out of the Colosseum one final time. The sand no longer clings to your feet. The armour, once a burden, now feels distant, like the memory of an old bruise that no longer aches. The sun dips lower in the sky, softer now, painting the world in gentle gold instead of harsh glare. You take a deep breath. No shouting, no commands, just the sound of your own steady breath and the soft rhythm of footsteps on the stone. The city that once roared for your pain is quiet. A pigeon flutters past. Somewhere in the distance someone laughs, not at blood, but at something simple, something human. You smile. Because in the end, your story, like all great ones, isn't just about the battles. It's about the will to keep going, the courage to get up when the world tried to keep you down, the quiet resilience that turned suffering into survival. So let your muscles rest. Let the sand fall away. You've made it through. Sleep well now, warrior. You've earned the peace.